Well, this is the Walter Bacon podcast where I highlight some of the most practical and game-changing B2B AI startups. Today, I'm with my friend Josh Bloom, CEO and co-founder of Valency. Prior to Valency, Josh was the CTO and co-founder of Wise.io, which was successfully acquired by GE Digital. His current startup, Valency, is the foundation for the new era of research, exploration, and innovation. Josh is deeply connected to the world of academia and research. He is a UC Berkeley professor of astronomy and former chair of the department. He's also the founding member of the Berkeley Institute of Data Science and the recipient of the Data-Driven Science Investigator Award from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the Sloan Fellowship, and the Hertz Foundation Fellowship. So, Josh, it's great to have you today.
Thanks for having me. Really happy to be here.
Awesome. Well, let's get right into the problem that you're solving with Valency.
So we are lovers of science and research. And as an academic over the last 20 plus years myself, I've seen the great benefit firsthand, not just for the people around me, but for society in what science can do for all of us. And yet at the same time, we've seen some of the institutions and some of the funding models and motivations start to change, and some would say maybe even buckle or crumble under the weight of a changing world. And partly that's our own fault. Partly that's how academia has been working for the last, say, 1,000 years or so, and not adapting to the times. But I think a big part of what we're seeing just in the last couple of years of these big changes is with the advent of AI and acceleration tools more broadly with coding capabilities. It's making existing research more productive, and it's adding to the overall volume. While at the same time, people have started to get concerned about the problems that start to creep in when you start using AI without sort of proper guardrails and harnesses in potentially producing hallucinations, producing statements that are factually incorrect, et cetera. We have self-correcting mechanisms within science to handle those things, but they happen on very long timescales. And I think what we've seen just in the last 6 months or so is this pushback from existing groups like publication groups, like preprint groups, starting to worry a lot about AI, both because of the volume and some of the challenges in doing human review around research outputs from a growing cohort of people who are engaging with AI. But they're also worried about hallucinations, and they're worried about sort of the pollution of the factual statements that we make in science, and we hope to build upon as we build better and better results. So, in a nutshell, what we're trying to solve and what we're trying to help with is this world of scientists and researchers who have been doing fantastic work before AI, and now they're trying to work with AI in ways that push the envelope. And we're trying to produce tools and infrastructure to make that happen, to make it better for them so that we can work quickly at sort of agentic scales and not human and peer review scales.
Mm-hmm. So you said your LLMs will love Valency. So can you talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, so the product that we have out in the market is an MCP connector to the entire corpus of papers that have been published openly. And this comes from preprint servers like arXiv and bioRxiv, but we're also pulling more broadly from other data sources like PubMed. And what we do for LLMs is we supply the fresh data, that is the non-hallucinated information about what's happening in all these different papers and who the authors are and who they worked with and what institutions they're at. And in doing so, we have kind of a better together scenario where we're not providing the brains, the frontier models and frontier open weight models are. And by connecting up the fresh data sources, it allows frontier models to reason over real data rather than have to imagine the data and conjure up the results from their own memory. And so the way to think about it is if you asked an LLM what the weather is today, it doesn't know because it was trained on weather data and our knowledge of weather from about 4 or 5 years ago and everything that led up to that. But it knows enough to say, oh, I don't know. So I will go make a tool call, in this case, out to the internet or using an API, and I will pull over, the prediction for what's happening in the next hour or what the weather is currently in my hometown. What happens with Valency Bond, which is our product, is that LLMs say, oh, I don't know the answer to that, but I know I can ask these deep questions of the fresh corpus of hundreds of millions of academic papers.
So the power of indexing these papers immediately, like what's the power in that?
There's a lot of really interesting use cases that are starting to emerge, even beyond the ones that we envisioned ourselves. But for academics that are engaging with, let's say, a new subject, and they want to get smart about, what's been done in the past and what is the current research, and who are the people that are working on this, and how it might be connected to them. Those are all questions that you can get answered very, very quickly. And then when people do A/B tests where they have Valency bond installed versus not, it's very, very clear that you get better answers because you're not just answering questions from old famous papers. You're answering questions from current papers. So people are interested in the science of science and the bibliometrics and understanding how AI is starting to be used in different fields. For instance, it's a question that many people often ask. Or if they're writing a paper and they're wondering, is there a method, maybe upload a section of a paper and say, is there a method that I don't know about that might be useful here? LLMs sort of get the first idea of like, maybe these are the types of methods, but then go off and ask the Valency corpus for specific examples of that and pull back some of those papers. And so having access to fresh data, as in data that was published in an archive maybe 12 hours ago or an hour ago, and have that show up immediately in the results means that you're not asking and answering questions on a stale corpus.
As far as like speed and just a better experience, so I've seen that the process usually goes research question, get a well-grounded reading list, and then do a bunch of scientific discovery. So how does your system just accelerate that process, and by what magnitudes?
I mean, there are people that we know in our orbit who have started using valency bond, who have been able to write papers in fields that they never worked in, and do this in the course of weeks and not years. I found for my own work in astronomy, stepping into a new field often requires months and months of really getting to know it and really deeply engaging with it. What we have is not a short circuit to domain expertise, but it certainly allows you to get very, very close up to the frontier, and then maybe make yourself, enough of an expert so that you can engage with the world's expert in that subdomain, and write a paper together and push the boundaries. So I find crossing over to new subdomains that you haven't really engaged with very useful. But one of the things that I think is also, fairly amazing is that in writing papers, there's a lot of kind of nitty gritty, right? You're writing an introduction to a paper, you know most of the literature, some of it, and asking the question, what else should I be citing? What are some other relevant papers? Or in a final draft before you submit it, saying, what are some citations that I missed? Well, you've been heads down on a paper for, X days or weeks or months. And you may have missed all the papers that have been streaming through, and you might have not recognized that there is a paper that's highly relevant for your work, and not just something that you need to cite because that's how we work. We build on top of the shoulders of giants, and we can't ignore the giants that have gone before us. But it may actually be something where somebody's published something that actually would change the way you view your own work. So I see this as a very dynamic process, and I think Valency is one of the tools that is going to be great for the world's academics to make use of.
You've also talked about the commercial applications and internal research departments and having things be secure and within your own borders, but be able to access the world of information out there. Can you explain that dynamic?
Yeah, so there's a lot of open science, open research, but there's a lot of closed science and closed research that typically happens inside either walled gardens or through publication paywalls. And we're trying to unlock as much of what is open and make it as freely available as possible to the world's researchers and academics who are working in nonprofits. But there are many R&D orgs who are producing their own research artifacts. And we're currently working on ways to try to help those folks get that work into these MCP connectors so that their own agents can build on top of their own research.
So I've heard you talk about other platforms as well, like Google has Co-Scientist, OpenAI has Prism, Anthropic has Claude Science. So how would you compare your platform to different platforms that are out there?
So we see this new era of AI science and AI-enabled science as an ecosystem, not as a single player who's going to dominate. And so instead of thinking of it as you're either using Gmail or you're using Outlook or something else, um, we think that there are going to be many components of this ecosystem. It's much more about what an entire stack looks like. And so the ones that you just mentioned, Claude for Science, is a set of tools that connect directly up into Claude and don't work with the other LLMs. And that's very, very similar to what we have. We feel like our data is still somewhat unique in the fact that we've been able to normalize and join it across multiple different data sources actually makes it cleaner and much more powerful, and really separates the concerns from who's doing the thinking from who's supplying the data. Prism is a kind of workflow management for building papers by OpenAI. So a lot of us are writing papers inside of a markup language called LaTeX. So it's sort of a LaTeX native, AI native capability that allows people to write there. So very different than the ideation that one might want to do with Claude and code building. And then on the Gemini side or the Google side, they have co-scientists, which is this collection of agents that do work on your behalf. So it acts as sort of an entire research group, looking at data, writing code, running code, analyzing it, and producing research artifacts. All three of those are incredibly different from each other in who the target audience is and what the use cases are. But we see ourselves as a different part of that ecosystem of providing other types of tools that are useful for all three of those types of endeavors, and then other sorts of publication and I'd say data extraction capabilities that don't exist in those other components. And so this ecosystem is nascent. It rhymes a lot with the ways in which we've done work in the past, but making these all these components AI native is really what the big power up is.
So you mentioned people joining the wait list. Who would be an ideal prospect? Who would want to be on that wait list ideally?
If you are engaging in research as an undergrad, as a graduate student, as a postdoc, as a faculty member, or a staff scientist, I think you should give us a try. Valency Bond is, again, it's free and open for all academics and nonprofits. And so why not see what you can do with your own research, how you can take it to the next level. But we also think that in time, there are going to be entire research orgs inside of large enterprises that will want to engage with the tooling that we're building.
Well, Josh, this has been great having you with us today and learning more about Valency. So it's really exciting to watch the company and look forward to seeing the company grow and everything. So thanks so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you, Walter.